Dobrý večer všetkým. Táto diskusia bude prebiehať v angličtine, ak niekto náhodou nevedel. Takže od teraz už nebude rozumieť, ak nevie po anglicky. So this discussion will be in English. This was just an announcement for Slovak participants. I would like to welcome you here in Záhrada in Banská Bystrica at the EMBARGO I METROPOLIS festival. I'm not one of the organizers, so I cannot tell you anything else about the festival. But I will be hosting and leading the discussion that we have today. And it will be about minorities and migrants in Slovakia and our attitudes towards them. So the discussion is officially titled Respect and Social Inclusion Towards Minorities in Slovakia. We have 4 distinguished guests. I will present them now, but before that I'm really glad and excited that the governor of region of Banská Bystrica joined us today, Mr. Hunter, so welcome among us as well, and maybe he will also join the discussion later. Also you, I know that we have an international group here, the group of young people from several countries being here at the international project exchange, and you will have a chance and space to also discuss, ask questions, or share the experience, opinion from your countries. So maybe first hour, 60 minutes, we will be discussing and talking with the guests, and then there will be space for questions, so think about them, and you are welcome to ask later. So before we start, I will just shortly present our 4 guests. They are coming from the field of working with refugees, migrants, Roma, and related topics. Let me start with ladies. So we have here Miška Pobudová. She's director of the organization and community center Marina. I will not be speaking about them now, but hopefully there will be a chance to present their work more in detail. And then we have Katarína Šomodiová from Faculty of Philosophy, Philosophical Faculty at Komunitného University in Bratislava. She's a religionist. And then we have Miro Janák from organization Pokoj a Dobro, that unofficially can be translated as Peace and Good, and it's also organization working with refugees in Slovak Republic. And finally, Jožko Miškolci from Slovak Governance Institute, that is think tank and analytical institute, also implementing various policies, and also there will be chance to learn more about their organization. Okay, so this was for the beginning, and for both groups, those who are locals, who are Slovaks, we discuss about minorities a lot. We discuss about tolerance and multicultural society. For you who are coming from other countries, maybe for the beginning, the opening question can be, even if we had a dispute about it before, if Slovak society can be seen as a racist country, as a country that is really hating all minorities, or is rather more tolerant country. So let's talk first maybe combination of your personal feelings and opinions, and also maybe what some statistic researches are saying about Slovak society in general. You can mention any minorities you want, but in general, how you perceive Slovak Republic, Slovak society towards minorities. And I will not be calling you by name, so please someone start.
Yeah, can you hear? In my opinion, we're exactly halfway between being nasty racist and opening, welcoming society. Of course, it's a very individual thing, you know. As everybody's different, everybody's attitude towards minorities, refugees, and otherness as such is different. But Slovakia has a very strange historic experience with otherness, with other cultures, with other ethnicities. And as being a relatively young country, a young nation state, Slovaks are not really, they're still enjoying the feeling of being unique and being the nation building state. And since this process has been relatively short, we haven't really gotten used to sharing our nation building status with somebody else. But this situation is changing. It's rapidly changing, and I believe it's changing for the better. But it's certainly a long process, which will require sacrifices on all sides.
Okay. That's one perspective, the short experience of own nation, the one of the youngest states in Europe, self-proving, let's say. So some other interpretation or observations?
So to answer your question, I live in Bratislava, where I work and live. And I perceive that I'm surrounded by people who are very open-minded. It's the NGO circle, which is very liberal, and all my friends on Facebook are of this opinion. So me personally, I feel that the community that I'm in is very open-minded and very embracing of otherness and difference. But whenever I come home, like to my home village in central Slovakia, it's always a kind of cold shower for me, because there is no informal meeting with my family members or my friends without mentioning any hate speech on Roma. Like, there is none. Like, that every single time we meet for any occasion, just to have a dinner or party or whatever, there is always some hate that is voiced against the Roma or against refugees, but in the region that I come from, it's mostly Roma. So there is this very diverse or different experience, like on a personal level. But to address your question from a research point of view, like from a statistical point of view, there have been made several opinion polls about this idea, and when there was measured, for instance, the attitudes of the public, of the general public towards the Roma, like, and I'm not sure if you are aware, like, what's the maybe I'll come to basics. So we have the largest minority in Slovakia is the Hungarian minority, that is around 9–10% of the population. Then Roma, according to the Atlas of Roma Communities, it's 7.5% of the population. So it's the second largest minority, ethnic minority in Slovakia. So it's around over 400,000 people. So it is visible, you know, like in the public discourse and also in the unofficial talks between any kind of family members or friends. The Roma are often a topic of discussion. So to answer the statistical question, when they were making opinion polls, usually the results are that the most radical attitudes against Roma, meaning that the people would wish to transport them outside of the country, so 2/3 of the populations answered this way. So that's really alarming. So that's the statistics at least.
Maybe I'll just add something with regards to migrants. We've recently applied for a project and we needed to put some background information into it. And we found out that a recent Eurobarometer survey that recorded views of the Slovaks towards migration were mostly negative. About 70% of Slovaks view immigration negatively. And we were only better than Hungary in the EU. At the same time, the proportion of foreign population in Slovakia is only 1.8%, which only in Czech Republic, which is our neighbor, the proportion is 4%. So while we have almost the worst views, or we have the most negative views towards migration, we have almost the least experience with migrants, which I think there is a correlation and a deal of causality. So I believe that one of the reasons that we we are inclined to not be open to foreigners is because we don't have that experience, and that the more we do experience migration and the more foreigners do come to Slovakia, and when we realize that foreigners do not actually want to bomb our supermarkets or they don't actually want to cause us harm, I think the views are going to become more positive as well. So I'm an optimist. I think Slovak society is not racist. I think we just lack this experience, and because we lack this experience, often politicians or whoever wants to use this lack of experience for their gains, they can use it to their advantage. So like Fico before our elections in 2016 said that he will defend Slovakia from foreigners and migrants, and he just galvanized this negative opinion towards migrants. But I think we're not that bad.
I will just maybe add one another statistics or findings, and to calm down optimism, because it's true that with some minorities, the more people know the group, the minority, the attitudes are getting better. It's LGBT community, Hungarian community, for example, in Slovakia. Those who are not living with Hungarians have more negative opinions about them, but also maybe migrants. But with Roma, it's totally opposite. We know that people, if they have experience with Roma, they usually have more negative perception. And with migrants and refugees, I think we will just see if which direction it will go. If the more personal experience will help, or because you can see it also on the cities and municipalities where now they are discussing the working migration, inviting Serbs and Ukrainians, and that very negative reaction. So I'm not that much optimistic that it also, I believe, needs some kind of political support for accepting migrants, especially. Miro?
Maybe there's not much to add after these opinions, and I agree with most of them. And I consider myself to be an optimist on this topic as well. So I'm glad to think that we are not a racist country, and we are closer, maybe from the midway you said, we are closer to the better state, hopefully. I think the question really is specific regarding the topic of Roma minority and other minorities. And for example, regarding the refugees who I work with, I think that society is not racist, even after discussions with people from the community in Nitra. There are some things they can tell about Slovakia, some good things and some bad things from their point of view. And usually the good things they can say is that they feel safe here, and they feel there is some level of freedom of speech, freedom of thinking, of religion, and so on. So I don't consider this society to be generally as a racist one. And I think the bad behaviors or bad actions of some individuals are usually caused by lack of experience, as you said. And I can see myself, I observe that people are changing after getting this experience, and they are behaving differently after, let's say, year of knowing people from Iraqi, for example. So I would like to say that I don't think we are like a racist country, and I try to find good examples and bright points on this topic.
If we will use or not use that word, or there is a definition of racism, but it's much harder to say if a person is racist or society is racist. But what was raised a little bit, and I maybe don't just want to make it the case of Slovakia, but this region, Central European region and post-communist region, seems to be the most either closed societies or negatively perceiving the minorities as such, or let's say conservative in a sense. You mentioned Hungary as being the most against foreigners. Also, Hungary is the most anti-Semitic in all kind of Eurobarometers. If you know, the European Union is regularly doing all kind of polls in all countries, so we can compare. And if we will call it racism or not, that these countries, Poland, Slovakia, Czech Republic, Hungary, for example, Czechs are the most anti-Islamic or Islamophobic country. So there must be something with our region. Can you maybe think of some other reason why this region, is it post-communism, is it something specific about Central Europe making it so much feared of minorities, or being so cruel towards minorities?
If I may, the region of Central Europe has been traditionally very ethnically and religiously diverse. Slovakia and Hungary and both the old Hungarian monarchy do have a lot of experience with Islam, both positive and negative. Just in the region of Nitra, there have been large Muslim communities back in the 9th, 10th, 11th century, which have disappeared by the 13th, 14th centuries. So, for instance, Islam in the ex-Hungarian monarchy is usually associated with the Ottoman Empire and the Ottoman dominance of large parts of today's Hungary and South Slovakia for over 150 years. So that's certainly a negative imprint. And then, after the Battle of Vienna in 1683, we've had pretty much no experience with Islam for the following almost 300 years. So we had a quite negative stigma left after the Ottomans left that day Hungary, and zero experience after that for 300 years. So that's certainly quite a difficult thing to digest, certainly. As with the Czech Republic, the question, why is there so much Islamophobia or xenophobia in general, is something that has been puzzling the academics for the past 20-25 years. And there is no really satisfying answer for this. Nobody has really been able to explain why the Czech Republic. Since the Czechs have had a lot more experience with different nationalities, different ethnicities, a lot more connections to Western Europe, to various minorities within their countries. They have had a lot more Muslims since the 1960s, 1970s, when a small but relevant influx of Middle Eastern, usually Arab Muslim students have appeared in present-day Czechoslovakia. So it's really difficult to answer why the Czech Republic, but it's a certain fact that the Czech Republic is certainly the most xenophobic country of Central Europe.
Do we have some other maybe reason why is it that? Why it's not only the Slovakia, but why this region?
I'm going to try to answer as well. To me, I'm also an academic because I teach at the Faculty of Education and I prepare future teachers of civic education. So that's actually the teachers who should be the ones trying to spread the tolerance and respect for difference in various sense, not just ethnicity and nationality, but other aspects as well. And my experience is that, at least my students, when we discuss these topics and our constitution and the articles that relate to tolerance of minorities, ethnic and national minorities, is that they don't really understand the concept of nation state. Like they see it as, since we are a nation state, we should be just one nation. They don't get it that every state has some minorities or like some difference, and they are like this. They have this fixed idea that since it's a nation state, we should be just one nation. They don't really get it. So they don't have a problem to express very negative attitudes even towards Hungarian minority, knowing that my surname is Hungarian and all these phenomena are happening there. So it's a very gradual process, but I think part of the problem is this not understanding that every state is not a matter of just nationality.
Maybe for the foreigners, I will just quote a little bit from our constitution and its preamble. It's starting, and we are discussing it as a activist a lot. It's starting the nation of Slovaks, and then you have several other declarations, and then together with national minorities, not mentioning anyone else. So there is no space for foreigners, migrants, and other citizens. So Slovak society or Slovak state is pretty much built hierarchically, and Slovak has some kind of superiority, maybe.
Well, as for the nation state itself, first and foremost, it's quite a new phenomenon. You know, it's just 200 years old, and already in Western Europe we have seen that the nation state as such, it doesn't work. Western Europe after World War II has all switched to the American model of citizenship-based states, even though in many cases they are still called nation states. We see that none of these models really work, as we see a social crisis in Western Europe. And we, Czechoslovakia, 40 years after the war, has decided to split up to nation states. This doesn't work. And Slovakia is not a nation state, no matter how much we want to be. But with over 1 million minorities, you cannot build a nation state. To a certain level, this is just a philosophical or theoretical issue. You know, when you go out to the streets and you see how things really work, you keep asking yourself, why could this be called a nation state? Why is our constitution so messed up when in reality you have Slovaks, Hungarians, Roma, and all other minorities living together without asking themselves questions? And of course, this cannot be understood by an average student. It's really difficult to digest for me. I have a master's in political science and an almost finished PhD in religious studies. And I still don't understand why we are called a nation state. And if I may just get back to the question of being optimistic, I believe we, as a Slovak society, we're on a very good way towards accepting minorities. It's going to be a long and painful process, but we're on the right path, I believe. And I do have a strong personal experience in this, because I'm of Hungarian ethnicity myself, and I've pretty much spent my entire teenage years either running or being beaten up for my ethnicity, for the language I speak at home and the language I speak with my dog. And I'm here. And nobody has harassed me for my ethnicity for the past 10 years or so. So I believe this is a gradual and slow process, but I believe it can work.
It's a good bridge towards the next topic question. I just wanted to mention that most of the societies are selecting some scapegoats for a while. So in Slovakia, after 1989, after the revolution, first it was Jews for a short time, Hungarians. In 90s, we were discussing Hungarians. Hungarians were national enemy, I would say.
We were,
yeah. After 2000, it moved more towards Roma. It was maybe 10 years of Roma being the most discussed. And suddenly, Roma are almost invisible in the last 3, 4, 5 years, I guess. You don't see many articles in media about them. And refugees, after refugee crisis, became the new scapegoat. So yes, Slovak society needs kind of like channel for their frustration maybe. But Roma and refugees are obviously the two groups that are the most hated, let's say, in the moment. So let's try to look for some similarities and differences. Maybe let's say some basic statistics, figures about Roma and refugees and their position in this country. We can say something about their status and maybe the rate of their integration or segregation from the society. And I will just make a small advertisement and promotion. I'm involved in a newly published magazine called Capital, which is a leftist cultural magazine. And the third volume is dedicated to Roma memory. And the opening article is about Roma and the manifest about their position in the European society. And one of the academics called Roma the permanent refugees. That they are like, since ever, being refugee. So maybe that's one of the similarities we can find. But let's talk more about these two specific groups, and maybe let's start with the refugees if Miro or Miška would like to start. So how many of them are there, how they are feeling here, maybe what's also the history of refugees in Slovakia?
Okay, so I guess to the numbers. As a practitioner, I would just like to give a disclaimer that we know much more with Miro from practice, what happens with refugees, what problems they face, and so on. So I'm glad that we have academics to add the beef to it. But when it comes to refugees, since 1993, we have actually given, as a Slovak Republic, thanks, asylum to about 800 people, and subsidiary protection, which is also sometimes referred to as small asylum, which is a temporary residence status, which can be renewed every year, to over 600 people. So this is the number of refugees that the Slovak Republic has allowed to stay in Slovakia. So just to give you a perspective, it's not in thousands, it's only literally in hundreds. And at the same time, the number of applications that we've had is in I think over 30,000 applications in this 24-year period. When it comes to their status, generally you can either have a refugee who will come spontaneously, who will cross the border, who will be relocated. For example, now it's often done from Greece or from Italy. So when they are in a destination that's not in a neighboring country where they're from, but from a different one, especially if it's in Europe. And then they can also be resettled. So they can be taken from a refugee camp and be brought to their new country of destination. And Miro is actually in charge of an organization that was taking care of a group of 149 Iraqi Christians that were resettled from Iraq to Slovakia. But our general experience is with the spontaneous refugees coming into Slovakia, or we have a few cases of relocated refugees from Greece. That's really interesting.
And let's talk from that practical perspective. You know, many of them, if you have 1,400 refugees in 25 years, and half of them has later left the country, we know about that, so the total number is even lower. You can really personally know every refugee in this country. And so what is their life, how they are succeeding and failing in becoming citizens of this society, or do they feel hated or maybe neglected or inferior in this country? What's their feeling about living in Slovakia? And maybe Miro can start and you can also add something.
I'm glad if you will continue. When I asked, I start with people from Iraqi community, which is closest to me from working point of view. When I start to ask them about their feeling on this topic in the earlier phase of the project, and they had some basic information about the Roma minority and how majority is understanding them, or actually not understanding them and seeing them. They were actually like afraid, or they were trying not to be understood and taken as a part of Roma minority, or not even similar to them, because they understood there is some real tension and some rough feeling from the majority. And gladly I could tell after some time that they are not a part of that community, and they are really different. It's totally different cultural world, different opinions, different seeing different perspective on life. So I think after time, people, when they are in the contact with refugees or migrants generally, it just takes maybe a few months, and I think, it's just my opinion, but I think that people see that refugees or migrants generally are not part of Roma community. and they are very different depending on what country are they from. Things that people from majority see as a problem with Roma minority, those things are not fulfilled usually with refugees or migrants. So I think after a few months, usually they are like out of that perspective, like that perspective on them. Hopefully makes sense.
When it comes to the level of success in integration, I think it varies widely. Miro has a more homogeneous group of refugees that they take care of. We have a very diverse, we have about 5 countries of origin, from Afghanistan, Syria, Somalia, Burundi. They vary in age, in composition. Some came alone, some came with their family members, and so on. And it really depends on each individual and each family. Some of them often come with some skills, and they're very motivated to stay here and to get a job and to become a part of Slovakia or the society. And if they come with this sort of attitude and they're willing to fight, even fight, negative perspectives, because it happens. To be honest, I can't think of a single refugee that would not have told me a negative experience with a Slovak, whether they told them to go home, whether they spat, on the side of a sidewalk when they were going past, or we've had some cases when actually a female Somali lady was actually assaulted twice in a week near the place where she lives. This is common occurrence for them, and they know that this is something that can happen to them. But when they take it in their stride, or when they are more resilient or become more resilient, I think they can succeed. It often takes attitude, sometimes a little bit of help. We can go into detail.
Wants to add something?
Just a little add. I think what really helps in the matter of integration is that these people, these minorities, usually don't have their own huge communities, their own camps, or let's say villages or whatever. So they are spread in the majority and among Slovak people, and this really helps integration a lot, and they are much more and sooner able to find a job, to be part of the community. So I think the question with or the situation of Roma community from the viewpoint of integration is totally different, because regarding that minority, I think we have a problem on the table which is 20 or 30 years long or old, and it's not being dealt with from the viewpoint of government and state basically.
Before we go to Roma, maybe I will give you the last, more specific question. You started to talk about the Mishka, and both for you, we know about the resettled group that half of them decided to go back later, so it's not easy to stay. So who has the best chances to stay, or and does it relate with religion and skin color maybe? Are these things very important for how?
I would really like to see a research done on this, but I'm not convinced that religion plays a part in it. Although I can say that with the Christian Iraqis, I felt that the general opinion was more favorable. But in practice, in day-to-day life, I'm not sure how much difference it made. When it comes to success, I feel that individuals have it easier. When a family comes, they often come from countries, for example, where it's enough that a father works and not the mother. And they find it difficult sometimes to actually to let the wife work, or get to be the change of mindset that actually two people will have to work to take care of the family. Often if parents come who are of higher age to Slovakia, they will have it much more difficult learning the language. The children pick it up quite fast, and they can often become the translators and the cultural translators for their parents in Slovakia too.
After experience with our clients, with people from the community, I really don't believe it has a lot to do with religion or a race or something like that. I think the ability, the chance to success, to be able to integrate is much more individual thing. For example, there are the same experience from different employers who are employing people from our community, and they say they can have the same trouble or even bigger trouble with the employees from Slovak, so with Slovak guys, and it doesn't really matter to them if the guy is Muslim or a Christian from Iraqi or whatever else, because after a year he got the understanding and the experience that if he wants to work, he will work, and if he doesn't want to work, he just wouldn't do it, and it doesn't like relate directly to the religion, race, or country of origin or something like that. So that's our experience. So I think that the matter of success or not success and the ability to integrate is strongly, or like maybe from 80%, the matter of individuality and the strong personality of the man or woman.
So now let's move to similar but very opposite minority of Roma. Those were 1,000 people, on the other side there are 400,000, but growing very dynamically. You mentioned that they are second largest group, but it's also the old data now, and it's becoming first very soon, because we know that the number of Hungarians is decreasing and Roma definitely increasing. So maybe today there is more Roma than Hungarians. And so it's a totally different perspective. So what are the basic facts about Roma, what we can say from the present perspective, but maybe a little bit from the historical? And Katka, I don't know if you want to comment refugees or Roma or both.
Thanks for the word. I think lots of you know the statistics as well, but I will try to mention it as well. So as I mentioned, the data is already a little bit old, as you mentioned, but the most reliable data is the Atlas of Roma Communities, because it is ascribed identity data. So it's not like with the census, it's that you proclaim your own identity. And with the Roma people, it's often a problem because they are concerned or often afraid to proclaim their identity as Roma, because they often experience like some abuse from the state institutions, so they do not want often to do it. So this Atlas of Roma Communities is data that is ascribed, like that there were lots of surveyors who were asking various relevant people in the communities about the numbers of Roma. And according to these numbers, so it's at that time, it was 2013, I think, when it was around 400,000, but now it's growing. But the most important information about this data is actually how they live, because in the media they are often portrayed that they live like that. Most of them live in very poor conditions, without electricity and without water, like in those really segregated communities, like which are just heads from wood or some iron. So according to this data, it's only around 19% of the entire Roma population. So it's about 80,000 people who actually live in these so-called third world conditions. And it's really, like, when I say it, it's really desperate conditions, like we are aware of it. But around half of this population lives spread like as a kind of integrated in the majority population. But the perception of the public is often very skewed, because whenever the Roma appear, whenever the Roma appear in the media, it's the portrayal of them living in these very poor, segregated communities. So that's a kind of skewed vision of them.
In organization, when I was working before, we even organized a public poll, first ever, asking people how many Roma are living in the Slovakia people are thinking, and the result was twice as much as real. So that's one part of reality, and 60 to 80% of people were thinking that most of the Roma are living in settlements. So that perception is very much twisted by, not just by media, but we mostly discuss these very poor communities. And in that perception, even my parents might feel like that's the common reality. So we need to talk maybe more about those who are less visible in that sense, definitely.
I mean, the so-called Roma problem of Slovakia is actually not a racial one or a cultural one. It's social and it's economic. And often when discussing the Roma settlements, we forget that, of course, most of these settlements in Central Eastern Slovakia are inhabited by Roma, but we tend to forget that we also have non-Roma communities which look like this. First. Second, the segregation which these people face when they get in contact with the majority. Again, it's not racial. It's even though it's called racial, because we tend to oversimplify facts, and it would take a much longer time to define the problem in its real depth. The problem is that these people, since they come from these segregated places, usually with very low education, they come from horrible hygienic circumstances. They are visibly different, they act very different, and they really look poor, unclean, if we can say it, physically, and poor. That's the main problem.
I agree with you, but on the other hand, I really believe that that's the problem of poverty. That this country is not even like naming or considering poverty the challenge or issue, but for the most of the people it became ethnic. They connected poverty with ethnicity, and they would now say that every Roma must be fulfilling this portrait, as you said. So that's the problem, like how to distinguish or start distinguishing, and even explaining to people that the Roma are very heterogeneous group and so on. And maybe if you can just elaborate a little bit what you're feeling. Are attitudes towards Roma changing? Is there some kind of a positive trend or not, or how does this cohabitation looks like today?
Well, I think it's very connected, on how to put it. The social psychology names it as having blind spots, and the way we perceive certain social groups. And with the Roma, I think, okay, we are mostly optimists because we work in this area and we want to change the society. But in a way, like with the way the prejudices work, it's that you have certain perspective, certain conviction, and when you see an example of it, you confirm your conviction. But whenever you experience a phenomena which oppose to this perspective, you don't see it. It's a kind of blind spot for you, and I think with the Roma, it's been for so long here, and it's so present in the non-formal talks, in media, that somehow I feel that it's not changing. You know, like that it often falls on the blind spot whenever we experience something different, and we always see those negative pictures of the Roma. Even if we were also doing this project on hate speech in Facebook, and like many of these discussants were saying, of course I know the Roma who are great and I'm really good friend with them and they are so diligent and they work and I love them, they are my friends. But the majority of them are just this, you know, like 95% of them are the social criminals and don't have any hygienic habits and so on and so on. So they do have very good positive experiences, but the overall perspective is just negative, and that's a part of the problem.
As for the, for instance, the issue of hygiene, I used to work as an English teacher for a couple of years in various small schools where I've also had Roma pupils who were adorable and definitely at least as intelligent and smart and everything as the non-Roma kids. But we did have a problem with hygiene, of course. Now my question is, how do you want to maintain hygiene if you have no running water? How do you want to wash your clothes if you have no washing machine and you can just wash them in the river, which is 3 kilometers away? How do you want to dry those clothes if you have no central you have no heating, not just central heating? So that's why I'm saying that what we call a Roma problem is actually a problem of poverty, and Slovakia has always lacked a long-term perspective on tackling poverty, the lack of education, and the existence of these settlements, which certainly do not belong to the European Union of the 21st century. But this requires really a long-term plan. It has to be a long and thorough process of eliminating poverty. And unless we stop talking about the Roma problem, but start to talk about the economic and social connotations of this issue, we are not able to step further.
I would maybe just a little bit add on that. I would call it a cyclic poverty, you know, like that it's a very rooted kind of vicious cycle of poverty, because the fact that you come from certain ethnic background, that we are visibly different, then you are born in the segregated settlement, there is no water, no electricity, then your parents are often unemployed, so you don't experience a role model of parents who would be working, and then when you need to go to school as a child, you often get sick because you don't have the heating and all this. So it's this very many aspects to it that influence it. It's not just well, it's economic, but all these services that should provide some kind of support, including schooling system, are failing because all these don't work. You know, it's the health, it's the housing, it's the employment and education. So like it's a complex picture, and all these fields are kind of failing because it's vicious.
I want to touch one more minority, and then we will open space for the discussion. But maybe I will just add that you mentioned that only around 20% of the Roma community is living in this very excluded and let's say segregated condition. It's true, but we must also say that from the rest, part of them is also living in very separated conditions, and so it doesn't mean that all others are more or less fine. But the problem is that demographic dynamics is the worst in that very poor communities. There is the communities that are growing extremely. If some Roma are integrated, and I believe it's with most of the minorities and not that poor, they started to have much less children. So the problem of these very extreme settlements is a ticking bomb in a way in Slovakia. And let's talk a little bit about Muslims and Islam as well. It's specific because it came also together with the refugee crisis, I would say. The topic of Islam was opened much, of course, because we have been believing that most of the refugees are most likely to be Muslims, especially because of Syria and Afghanistan. And I would say that rejection or denial of the refugees is not always connected with Islam, but I feel somehow that Islamophobia is beyond a lot of our negative attitude towards refugees. I might just maybe add that Slovakia even went to European Court with a petition against quota, against the European Union idea of somehow dividing the number of applicants from the countries that are on the borders. And we failed, we were not successful, but Slovakia with other Visegrad countries showed very, very strongly at the beginning that we don't want to have more asylum seekers here, and it was not directly linked, but in the same time very anti-Muslim or Islamophobic statements appeared for the first time, I would say, in the recent history. So do you believe that, or what we can say about Islamophobia and Muslims in this country, and is it a reason for our negative attitudes towards refugees?
Well, to a certain level, it's not just Islamophobia, but it's xenophobia in general. For one thing, it has certainly been inspired by the Czech Islamophobia, which is a much longer issue and a much stronger one. And of course, the migrant and refugee crisis, I tend to distinguish between the two terms, and the populism which was connected to it, and the political upheavals, and the very, very emotional, immature, and conflicting, polarizing debate, which was connected to the crisis, have strengthened Islamophobia in Slovakia a lot. Islam has not really been an issue in Slovakia since we did have an established Muslim community, which numbers somewhere between 2,000 and 5,000 Muslims. Nobody knows the exact number, not even the Muslim organization of Slovakia. And all of these people have been integrated, functioning as members of the society, paying taxes, raising their children, abiding the law, etc. And suddenly they have appeared as a problem. All of a sudden, your dentist was suddenly called an enemy of the state. And it's just politics. It's nothing else but populist politics, attempting to polarize the society, attempting to gain more and more votes, trying to persuade the voters. Nothing else. There's nothing deeper in this. This is a very, very traditional method of trying to gain political power in times when something in the state is not working as it should. Be it the issue of economy, Slovakia in numbers is in a perfect economic situation where you can't really see it, especially not outside Bratislava. The more east you go, the less you are convinced of the wonderful economic boom that we're experiencing. We still do have a relevant unemployment rate, etc., etc., etc. So Slovakia is definitely not as healthy in terms of economy, in terms of society as such. And it's always easier to find somebody to blame, to find the external enemy, and first, try to convince the mass to look to the way of the external enemy, which usually can't really defend itself. Like in the case of Muslims, how can they defend themselves in this debate?
For our foreign visitors, maybe we can mention the fact that every religion in Slovakia, if they want to be officially registered, they need to register. And just this year, or last year it was, we increased the threshold for registration from 20,000 to 50,000 members. We have up to 5,000 Muslims. So I think that never must Islam will be officially registered in the Slovakia as a religion, and it's making us the only country in the European Union that doesn't officially recognize this one of the biggest world religions. Do you have experience in your practical work that fear of Islam is beyond a lot of what your clients are experiencing on everyday level? Do you think that that's what people are afraid of?
Well, one of the things about religion, Islam, is that you can't identify a person unless it requires for females to wear a scarf. Although it might often be more cultural than religious, and we have that experience with our clients. So when it comes to men, I don't think anyone has ever told me that they would be attacked, particularly for being Muslim. But the situation I mentioned about that Somali lady, she was actually wearing a scarf, and the attacker did tell her to go home from where she came, and he started to drag her scarf down and started to strangle her with it, which I believe might be connected to a belief that she was a Muslim. But yeah, I think it has been in the past years often merged, the term refugee with the Muslim, and that has kind of given it more strength or more offensive kind of power when it's being used as an offensive term in general.
I don't have that much experience or contact with Muslims or their communities at all, but sadly I have to confirm the thing that Kaka said, that it's usually the thing of the politics trying to get some points and gain some more votes from it. And I sadly have to confirm that it works, apparently. I remember the discussions in my family, for example, when I started to work with the community of people from Iraq. And after like 10 minutes of arguing with the guy, I actually told him, like, what do you argue about, as I'm actually working with the Christian people. And he then told me that they are all Muslims, they're just lying to us. So it's like kind of joke, but it's the example when I can understand that people are really like, I wouldn't say scared or terrified, but just like confused and like overlied by politics trying to get some wins.
But you are saying that you don't have experience, but for most of the people in Slovakia, I would like to ask if you mention that they are Christians, if something changed in the perception, if this is this crucial key argument that makes people satisfied or not, if our hatred towards refugees is stronger than hatred or accepting Christians, let's say. So does it help to say that, calm down people, these are Christians?
Well, I wouldn't tell it doesn't help at all, but it really helps a little bit. Like, let's say it matters in 10%, like for a possible employer, let's say. He doesn't really care about this fact. And if he's trying to get somebody employed, he's caring about his abilities and some, I don't know, certificates or what he's capable of. And the matter of religion is like maybe 10% of the situation.
In the final round, or the final question will be about what's working and how we might maybe move forward. You want to add something?
Sorry, just to express myself better. If I didn't convince somebody to cooperate or to even get to contact with the people from Iraq community, if he was convinced that he doesn't want to cooperate, to work with them, it didn't help to tell him that they are Christians or something. It didn't change the situation.
But before closing the debate, we have some time for questions. Yes, just raise a hand. We will try to not use microphone. If we will hear it, it's fine. If not, I will try to repeat the question. And if it will not work, I will come with the microphone. So at the end, we have a question, yeah?
Hello, I'm one of the international guests here. Thank you for this very interesting discussion. But I did want to ask, you're describing your clients that they experience, that every one of them has experienced some abuse, and the shocking case with the Somali lady and so on. And you were saying, there's the poverty issue, so it's a question about what's being done about it. So I do want to pose the question to the panel, how can things get better? I mean, you did say Slovak society is not racist, and of course, you have to be optimist and working in this field. But how can these things improve? If even when you're discussing about Slovakia might have a labor market shortage and so on, if even migration of Serbs and Ukrainians is being seen as critical.
Let's save this question. I will totally ask the same thing at the last question. So how can things improve? What can be done? But before that, if there is someone who wants to clarify things or be more negative for a while, so let's do this first and let's end up with something more positive. So another question or comment?
It is a comment, by the way, Darko from Serbia, also part of an international crew. It's also replying for Tobias when he's mentioned the migrants. Is economical migrants, someone say from Serbia and Ukraine. I can say from Serbia the case, I know a lot of people, a lot of my friends who came in here to work 6 months, 3 months. I don't know how much is the duration of that labor time for some ridiculous amount of money for the Slovak people, but at the same time the level of money what is not reachable in the Serbia, and impression from them and impression from me. I was first time here in 2006 and 2005, sorry, and after 12 years I'm here again, and I can say that my personal experience then is Slovakia is really open-minded state. I like to talk with the people everywhere, especially in informal time, on the bars, during these days, on the Christmas fair, during on the street. And really, I'm not get impression that in Slovakia more racist state than Belgium, an example. Really. And by the question, I don't know. In Serbia, we don't have a lot of problem. We are a state, we are a country when migrants want to pass only. No one don't want to migrate in Serbia. We are migrants. No one don't migrate in our case. And same time, I don't know, by a lot of enquetes and a lot of documents by really people who are moved from the Syria and in the part of the Middle East who are on the war area. We are declared like one of the state what was most hostile with them. Of course, in our blood, we remember before several years we was refugees. I don't know, from countries around Serbia, it's more than 300,000 people move in Serbia like refugees. And now is amazing, but I feel shame by that. It's still refugees, not a camp, is how to say, not permanently place for them from the 90s. And by, how to say, also, that is a comment and replying for Tobias and my comment about Slovakia, then I feel, okay, I don't go deeply, I don't know. But that is my experience. That I think is not so. For myself, the Slovakia is really hostile state, warm, except that snow outside. But okay, any state is not perfect.
I agree, or about that. If you are more open-minded and so I cannot judge. But you mentioned that Serbia is just a transfer country, yes, and so on. And for Slovakia, just maybe to edit or clarify, it changed with entering European Union. Before that, we also were not attractive at all, and we don't have. And I always imagined that the Chinese young guy who wants to migrate to Europe and he decides, I want to go to Bratislava. That's the dreamland for me. Like, there's no one in the world who wants to end up in Bratislava, otherwise if he has some family or some other reason. But no one knows about Slovakia usually globally, so we are not that much magnet for migrants.
And I want to add what is really important for me, and I believe that the process of education need to be from both sides, you know, from not only not unilateral, need to be bilateral. Also, the new society, new let's say people who migrate here, you know, okay, we are talking about Islamophobia, but we need also to educate them and to educate the residential people here, you know, how to communicate and how to make that intercultural dialogue. If one side strictly stay in believing of that, nothing will happen. I don't know. That is personally my experience. In a simple, I don't know, example, if I'm go in Riyadh or somewhere, I don't really eat bacon on the street. Why? I know that is not appropriate and I respect place where I am. And of course, it's for the good integration, the education is one of the most important part, but need to be, you know, from both sides, you know, not only from one side. In that way, we can make this kind of multicultural society. What is a meaning of everything what we say tonight about this topic?
Thank you. Some other comment or question? Topic? Okay, so let's go back to that question, and I will just make it a little bit even larger. Even if we are tolerant or racist or a little bit tolerant, so we always can be more tolerant, that's definite. So what we can do, or what we are already doing, and how to become maybe the magnet for migrants or all minorities, and also the example of integration and so on. I just would like to really give you a space for all of you that NGOs are doing a lot of work, and both your organization in refugee crisis, it was not a government initiative, it was a real initiative of a small groups that decided to show that something can be done and people don't be crazy, let's help to someone else. So what's working already, what could improve the situation? Can you imagine in 20 years that the situation with refugees, migrants in general, and Roma could be radically different? Start.
I'll try to start with this one. I'm glad that you said the number 20. 20 years you said, or something like that. Maybe that's probably the good guess, or what I feel in everyday work, and also when I'm trying to step out and some wider concept, is that we are still missing, I would say, any or good support from the, I wouldn't say government, maybe the support in law and some directives from state on state level, policies and so on. We are still missing them. We are missing like basic things. Let's say we are missing state migration program and all other stuff. There are some good steps and some attempts to improve those things and to work on them, but this might take maybe, I don't know, another 10, 15, maybe up to 20 years. And even when we are meeting with colleagues from NGOs, from Germany, from USA and so on, I feel and I see that we are actually like really 30, 40 years behind the schedule with these things, with the discussions and connections between NGOs and government and so on. So I think it will take many years to improve those things, but I really like that I can see some movement in this and some good steps. But I would say like this is the main problem. For me, working in NGO, I see there is like really none or just more like funny support from the government. Having these policies, actually not having these policies and not having the things ready. So my goal or like the motivation for me is to gain as much experience as possible and to get some output from our work and to help to improve those policies and to work on them and to participate on cooperation, which is like trying to improve some things. But for now, the level of these policies and programs on the state level is really low.
Yeah, basically I think Miro said it, but I just put it into two words or two things. I think first is definitely strong and positive political leadership on this issue. So, you know, get rid of this trying to vilify Muslims, refugees and migrants in general and start to portray them as a benefit to the society with, of course, opening discussions about the potential challenges and so on. Totally, we're all up for that. But try to actually bring this positive discourse on migrants in general into the public space. And the second is to strengthen integration policies, to let actually the refugees and migrants coming to Slovakia to thrive, because when we help them thrive, they will actually become real benefits to the society. We could go into details about what the specifics are, but I think these two.
Maybe I will just add that we were talking about quite a negative attitude towards foreigners. I might even say that that with refugee crisis something has worsened. 10 years ago, the Michal Vašečka research polls were showing a positive trend, and I think we somehow backlashed back to 10 years ago. But also in the comparison of the policies, we are doing very, very poorly in the integration policies of the foreigners, and without that you cannot really like achieve a strong success. So it's not only the attitudes, it's also the policy level. Let's talk about Roma or any kind of academic perspective on.
If I may add, concerning the refugees, of course we absolutely lack any political strategies in this issue. One thing that always resonates in me when I discuss these things is what a distinguished Hungarian professor specialized in the Middle East and North Africa told me about the refugee and migration crisis. Was that, you know, if you invite two people for dinner to your 2-bedroom apartment in a block of flats, you're really happy and they come and you're really happy to give them your best food, etc. Suddenly, if 200 people appear in that apartment, you're in shock. You don't know what to do. This is what happened in Europe. The other question is how come we were absolutely not prepared for this? I mean, if we look around the Middle East, Africa, and practically all of the world, if we look at what's been happening for the past almost 20 years, all around the world, we were supposed to expect a huge influx of refugees. And then I believe we were supposed to expect something a lot worse and a lot sooner. Europe needs to
I would just a little bit disagree, because this example sounds nice, like 200 people, but what needs to be said that increase in that year 2014-15 was just 50% comparing with previous years. So it's like you're expecting 2 and you get 3 people, and it's not something not negotiable. It seemed like they are so much more, but in reality it was not that much. I still believe that Europe was able to absorb.
Absolutely, absolutely. Europe as such was absolutely able to absorb this number, and to a certain level it has. She was talking about the Visegrad 4 countries, the Balkan countries. For Slovakia, Hungary, the Balkan countries, this was certainly a shock. Even though I believe we were supposed to be prepared for this a long time ago, but yeah, this was still a certain shock. Yeah, no policies. What I've been really surprised by is still the lack of educational materials for the Iraqi children, which go to elementary school, and loads of things which are still missing. And there's a lot of work that needs to be done, and we are working on it. Also concerning the Roma community, I mean, a lot of work is being done, but it's a long-term process. It's a long run, but I believe we will get there one day. Okay, somehow.
And about Roma, can we be as optimistic as well?
Well, I think in comparison to the migrant topic, or refugee topic. I think Roma topic is in this sense a bit different because we have this issue for a longer time, so also the policies are more developed, I would say. We have the plenipotentiary office for Roma communities, and there are lots of projects going on, also at the national level and also in the NGO sector. And there's also this interesting trend that people who are active in the NGO sector, so who are really innerly convinced that they want to help the society, also join this public administration sphere to actually help. So I feel that there is a bigger link between the state and the NGO sector in this topic, at least that's my perception. But still, this approach can actually backfire, and it often does backfires, because then the public interprets it that there are all this money from the EU and from the state invested in this topic of integration of the Roma, and it doesn't work. You know, it goes into a black hole or something. So often the interest of the public administration or some financial investments to improve the situation can be interpreted as a failure or as a waste of money because they are not interested, and so on and so on. But on the positive note, I specialize on the field of education, and there are growing examples of good practice in the field of education, and there are many ways how to do it, or many aspects to it, but I will pinpoint at least one, and that's expressing the interest and a positive picture of the Roma history and Roma literature and all the cultural aspects of the identity, and relate to it in a positive way, you know, because that's often missing in the education system, that there is, even if there is majority of the Roma students in the school, there is no mention of the Roma identity at all, or anything related to the history. So if they feel that they are seen and respected and praised, then also the approach of the children can be changed a little bit. But as I was saying, it's more complex. It's not just the education. You must deal with the housing, with the health, with employment, in order to, in a longer run, to make change. But yeah, there is some effort from the state as well, not just the NGO sector in this field. You know what?
I'll just focus to the original question, what can be like better. What I'm thinking about, if we are able as a country, if we are able to make some progress in these topics, doesn't matter if it's migrants or Roma question. If we are thinking about 10 or 15 years from now, it's basically about the people who are, let's say, at high school now, currently. So it's, to me, it's totally like the big part is the education part. But knowing the conditions and the state of Ministry of Education on the state level in Slovakia, like how often we change the strategies and how it doesn't work, basically, as a ministry. I don't know if it's like, I'm glad to say or I'm sad to say that it's maybe the goal and the responsibility of NGOs, for example.
I have the chicken-egg question. First, we need the good policies and political leadership, and mindset of the people will change, or first we need to wait for change of the mindset and then the policies will come. So what you believe, maybe we don't know the right answer, but what do you think is first step? Leadership and policies, or people changing the opinion?
I don't really want to just avoid the question, but I want to say it has to be like hand in hand. I think both things together. But I think to change the policies and to make it better on a state level will take longer. So the other thing is first.
In my opinion, you know, you need both factors working hand in hand, because there will be no serious change of policy unless there's a demand for it, a strong, relevant demand. On the other hand, you know, the public opinion, when we're really talking about the huge public, the mass, will not change unless there's a strong support for the issue by the state.
True, yet at the same time, I think President Kiska was a relatively positive figure in this, and he's widely popular. Let's say he's generally popular, right? He beat the Prime Minister in the presidential election. So he must be sufficiently popular. And I think this doesn't have to be a political suicide, this issue. And if a good leader who has a good track record in other areas will decide to move on this issue, I think he can do it even though there won't be a massive support from society as such.
Yes and no. First and foremost, President Kiska certainly is a popular character who has quite healthy opinions on otherness and diversity. But if you look at the political system of Slovakia, he has practically no competences. In the Slovak political system,
but
the
on the
president
mindset of the people, maybe it can a little bit work.
Yeah, but that doesn't change the law. That's unfortunate.
Sure, and I wasn't talking necessarily about Kiska in particular, but I think as a political figure who models kind of on that sort of personality.
In my opinion, the most relevant point here is that how many laws are passed every month without the great attention of the public. These are things that do not require a huge media attention. We don't have laws and regulations for dozens and dozens of phenomena concerning the integration of migrants, the arrival of migrants, the education of migrant children, etc., etc., etc. You do not need strong media attention concerning this issue. So this actually doesn't really have to be a political figure who will stand in front of the public and say, I'm the big pro-migrant guy who will set the goals here.
My answer would be similar. It needs to go hand in hand, but well, I forgot what I wanted to say. But that's the.
I have the final question. You can say yes or no, but I will say 3 questions. You can decide which one. Even are aware of some refugee living now in the Syria. Would you recommend him to apply for asylum in Slovakia, or would you recommend some other country? Even of some Muslim who wants to maybe move here and start business, would you recommend him to come to Slovakia or rather not? And even of some Roma who is 18 years old, finishing high school, would you recommend to stay in Slovakia or try to emigrate as soon as possible? So from the personal perspective, what would you be recommending to concrete person? To come in Slovakia, to stay, or rather avoid it?
I think it's a good one. I wouldn't answer him right away. I would ask another question first. For sure, I would check his or her expectations first, because that's what I learned on the project in Mitra. You need to know about people's expectation before you can advise them to come here or not to come here, because it's not what will make them happy and satisfied. So it depends. If the majority of their expectation, if the main issue for them is, let's say, safety and country with the freedom of speech and religion and other stuff, then I wouldn't see a problem to recommend them to come to Slovakia. And there is a really good chance for them, if they want to be active, a really good chance for them to success and to get integrated and to get a part of really good Slovak society. So, to me, it's still the relation between expectations and possibilities. If their expectations are economical, for example, I would definitely tell them not to come here.
Someone else?
I would return to the previous question and then answer the second one. So, with the previous question, the political and the social change, I think that it's changing here as well. Like, for instance, the last election, I literally didn't have anybody to vote for, or I had really strong dilemmas because every single political party that was an option would have some aspect very problematic in terms of acceptance of difference. So, and there are some signs that there are appearing some political formations that are openly more accepting the difference. So I feel that even in this sense the society is changing, and so the process, or your question was if it should happen, what should be first. So I think it already happens in the parallel. And to answer your question, I would definitely recommend to stay because I love this country. But I would express also the concerns, what it would mean, you know, like that it would be definitely a challenge, and the person would need to develop certain level of resilience, but it can be a rewarding experience.
I absolutely agree with the guys.
Yeah, I have nothing to add. Definitely, it would need a thorough presentation of what Slovakia is about and what this specific person would deal with, or what he or she would have to face in Slovakia. In a complete vacuum, I know it's a fact that there are better integration policies elsewhere outside of Slovakia in general, but yeah, I think I'm also I'm a pro-Slovakia if that specific person would choose based on the information.
I like this question because on individual level, I must say that I recommend to every young Slovak, either Roma or non-Roma, to try to study abroad and to try maybe to go to pursue his personal happiness in Scandinavia. There are better countries yet, but still we want to change this country. But on individual level, it's not that easy to recommend. And Germany for refugees is still, I think, better choice, even if it's changing as well. It's not easy to answer, but let's make this country attractive for Roma and for refugees and for migrants. Maybe once we will succeed. Okay, thanks to 7 brave of you who stayed, and I hope it's not just because you fall asleep. And I hope that you enjoyed it. I believe that some of us are staying in the bar, so if you want to discuss something informally, we are here for a while. So thanks a lot, and have a nice evening, Saturday evening.